Hello, my name is Ryan Hardesty, and I am the Interim Executive Director here at the Jordan Schnitzer Museum of Art at Washington State University. And let's go ahead and get started with our program. We are so thrilled to be able to share this live-streamed program with you featuring artist Etsuko Ichikawa. So thank you for joining us from wherever you may be this evening. And let us begin by acknowledging the Washington State University Pullman campus is located on the homelands of the Nimipu tribe and Palouse people. We want to acknowledge their presence here since time immemorial and recognize their continuing connection to the land, to the water, and to their ancestors. As we consider this land acknowledgement, I think we'll find many aspects of this evening's talk that connect to shared values of stewardship. How can we be better guests upon this land? Etsuko Ichikawa's Broken Poems of Fireflies exhibition, which is currently on view in the museum, is the fourth in a series of commission-based exhibitions the museum has undertaken since 2018. These commissions seek to support artists at a level that encourages ambitious thinking and complex undertakings, and then always to be debuted here at WSU Pullman for our community. But we couldn't do this without our valued donors. Today's program, as well as Etsuko's exhibition, were made possible through the generous support of the Samuel H. and Patricia W. Smith Endowment, as well as members of the Jordan Schnitzer Museum of Art. With that, I'd like to now turn to Kristen Becker, the museum's education coordinator, who has really masterfully organized today's program and who will introduce our special guest. Thank you so much for being with us this evening.
Tonight, I welcome all of our viewers to Etsuko Ichikawa. She's going to be speaking about her exhibition here at the Jordan Schnitzer Museum of Art, Broken Poems of Fireflies. And I'm going to keep this introduction really brief because you've all been waiting to hear Etsuko talk. So Ryan thanked all of our wonderful donors that made this exhibition and have made the Jordan Schnitzer Museum of Art possible. So I'd just like to thank them. And I'm going to let Etsuko begin speaking about her work now. She's a Seattle-based artist, born in Japan. She's represented by the Winston Wachter Fine Art in Seattle, and she's received numerous wonderful recognitions and awards, and I think you're going to see for yourself as she begins speaking tonight about her creative motivations and everything that's brought about this exhibition. So at the end, we will moderate some questions as time allows. I can see the chat and I will keep track of your questions, so please share them.
Hi, everybody. I know you have seen my first slide without my face, but I'm smiling and greeting to say hello to all of you. So thank you so much for your time tuning in to my artist talk. And I'm going to talk about a little bit of myself, as a background, and then focus on speaking about the exhibit, which has 3 films from my past 7 years of filmmaking, and then a glass installation. It's a room-size large installation, and also a few other projects that I'm going to include so that you can get to see how I got here to show this work. So I'm Japanese, and I love my country. And these are my parents, and they are 90 years old and 93 years old, but still kicking. And my father is a tailor, and my mother helped his business, sometimes as a seamstress and sometimes as a bookkeeper. And so my background or the childhood memory is a lot to do with my father's workshop, playing with patterns, textiles, threads, and there are many sewing machines in the studio. And I recognized as a person who might be very creative because I have to thank my mother pointing out this particular small drawing of cosmos, the flower of cosmos. I think I was 4 years old or 5 years old at the kindergarten. She said, "Etsuko, look at your drawing, and yours is very unique." And then becoming artist or want to be an artist was very natural to me. So I went to art school from junior high and high school, and studied mostly paintings. And my influences or inspirations mostly coming from nature. And I love watching clouds floating because it's ever changing. Like every single moment, you wouldn't see anything the same. Same thing about water, light and reflection, always a wonderful trigger for me to think about what I want to make. And I remember this particular day, I was on campus at the art college in Tokyo, and seeing this like beautiful shaft of light coming through the trees and the leaves. And then I felt so small. Somebody, probably like 18, 19, probably 20 years old, trying to make something, trying to express something, but I felt so small because the nature, what's creating to show us was so much bigger. So I stopped making anything. I'm sort of like my, character or personality is either black or white, like 0% or 100%. Some of you know me really well, knowing that. And so I quit making, and I just didn't want to do halfway through. So I didn't make any drawings at all for, let's say, like 3-4 years. And then I had this interesting event in my life about the health issue, really triggered me to ponder like what I was born for. Then one day I went to bookstore and opened a book, like art magazine, and the first page I opened was a glass intensive blowing session on the island of Noto-jima. That's how I started blowing glass. And it changed so much since then. I mean, blowing glass really changed my life. The first time I blew glass or I gathered glass, I just had goosebumps everywhere in my body and felt like, wow, what is this material? That the fluidity of glass and how beautiful that is, like a golden, glowing gold color in the furnace when it's molten. And then just like honey, the viscosity is so fascinating. So I started making glass, working with glass intensively. That was 1991. And then at Pilchuck Glass School, I was assisting somebody. That was back in 2004. I saw this glass dripping onto the concrete floor that made beautiful charred markings. And, that happens all the time in a studio, but that recognized, in such a special way. So I thought, oh my God, I have to start making something using this technique. So this picture is really showing how I make a series called Glass Pyrograph. Pyrograph is literally, pyro is fire, graph is drawing, so I draw with fire. And I'd like to show you a short excerpt of a film called 2100 Degrees and 451 Degrees. I was featured as an artist to show the process of making glass pyrographs. So I show you some examples of glass pyrograph from this series, and I made smaller to large pieces. Some are really, large installations, mixed media, at the galleries, museums, community places. And then making of this series became a performance because the process is so interesting. That's how I get so intrigued and inspired when I work with molten glass. And people also saw that. So I was asked to create a performance. This was at the Museum of Glass in Tacoma. As well as outside event that I put together to celebrate my life. That was my 50th birthday. It was a really beautiful day. And then this piece must be most seen piece of work that I created. And it was exhibited and displayed for a few years. I can't remember, but quite a long time at Bellevue Arts Museum. Title is Traces of the Molten State. Details. And I also created mixed media using glass pyrograph as a part of the installation. Detail shots. Those are blown glass, and the video projection is on the glass surface. This is probably the largest installation I created back in 2011. And this was at the University of Wyoming Art Museum. And around this time, I started using video as part of my artwork, as well as audio. This circular platform has 4 speakers underneath and played some sound that I created by dripping water. These are some workshops. And March 11th, 2011 was the day, I have to say, it was shocking. And earthquake, magnitude 9.0 earthquake happened in Tohoku region of Japan. And that caused tsunami, and that caused nuclear meltdown at Fukushima Daiichi nuclear plant. And then that really deeply affected me in so many ways as a person, as an artist. And then it took me for 2 years to really digest the experience, what it means to be living afar from my home country of Japan, having my parents, elderly parents living there, and all my friends from university time, and then making something in this country, in the United States, about 5,000 miles away. So this was my first piece in response to what happened in Fukushima. And this is one of the 3 films that showing at the museum. And Satsop is the nuclear facility in Elma, Washington. And this film was entirely filmed within a cooling tower. And the first time I visited there, I was really, how can I say, it's like mix of anxiety and fear because of it's associated with nuclear disaster. But once I enter the space, the place was like amazingly beautiful. It's almost like being in a cathedral. And looking at this circular opening of blue sky and birds, flying and clouds moving, and I felt something very, very unique in the space. So that's why I wanted to go back there and make a film as my prayer for Japan, and also hopefully like a purification using water, because this is a cooling tower and there's a reservoir underneath of the catwalk level that I filmed. So I used bamboo and pouring water into the tower, thinking about people who lost their loved ones in Fukushima. And then my work really started taking a different direction around this time. In response to Fukushima nuclear disaster, my work became more socially engaged. And this is one of the examples I want to share. It's called Himadi Project. And I made handmade cast paper, sunflower seed embedded at the center, as you see. And then I drew watercolor, 3 yellow marks, which seems to be nuclear alert symbol. This is like a process of making cast paper. And then the reason why I used sunflower seeds is that scientifically it's proven that sunflower has the nature to absorb toxic materials from the land, from the ground. So I thought this would be a great idea to distribute those seeds and asking people to plant, maybe pea patch people or community gardens or personal backyards to grow, so that it's sort of like symbolic idea of cleansing the land. And we had gone out with a group of friends to distribute those seeds, and then ask them to get back to us once you have flower blooming. Another project I had was 1,000 questions. And then this is also a community-based project. My collaborator and I collected questions. What do you think about, what do you want to leave for future? And what is your questions around nuclear issues? And then, for example, one sentence or the writing that I got was, are you sympathetic or are you invested? So we drew those questions onto lanterns and then floated onto Green Lake on August 6th, which is the Hiroshima Memorial Day. And next one is another film that I'm showing at the museum here. And this question about what I want to make as an artist or what I want to say really came down to the point where I want to ask more fundamental question. What is important to us? What is important to you? And then I also wanted to ask people who are visually impaired and ask a question, what is beautiful to you? This is another 1-minute excerpt of the film. What is beautiful to you?
My family, friends, music, sparkles. The reason why I like sparkles is because of the texture.
My family, my older sister, my brother.
The world. like all the friendships that I have.
Living each day to the fullest.
Fear's never been a thing for me because fear was never an option.
People.
Because beauty for, even a blind person doesn't have to come from the eyes.
That'd be something that I get captured into.
Laughter, I think, is one of the best things that people offer.
Music especially, because music has always been a part of my life, and my mom and I like to sing together.
What is beautiful to you? Sorry about that. So this is a still shots from the film using the Braille typewriter. And this is the last scene of the film showing what I typed in dark, pitch dark in the tunnel. It said, "What is beautiful to you?" And then I visited Hanford, which we have in the state of Washington where we live. And this is the Manhattan Project where they produced plutonium for nuclear weapon, creating bombs like Fat Man that was dropped to Nagasaki. And during the trip and the visit, I received this small gift, which is a vitrified piece of nuclear waste. And this became such an interesting piece to me. I have to say this could be an origin or genesis of the exhibit that I have at the museum here, because this connected a few things for me. It's a love, my love for glass, and as well as connection to nuclear disaster. And then what this is that at the vitrification plant at Hanford, they mix glassy substance with the nuclear waste to melt together and then cool it down so that it's solid, looks like lava, looks like glass. And then they pour the material into a stainless steel barrel or column and then bury them into the ground. And I thought that this is a really interesting connection that I could personally make as a Japanese, and also Japan has, nuclear legacy as the country and nation. So I wanted to use some Japanese historical pieces to create glass sculpture using uranium glass, which is radioactive. So this is based on the Jomon vessel. It's a prehistorical time of Japan, about 5,000 years ago. And I had such a great time researching for this project, visiting archaeological sites and museums by the river called Shinano River. That's the largest river in Japan. And I literally made replicas, as close as possible in glass. This is also this is actually an interesting piece that I combined 2 or 3 different figurine we call dogu, also from Jomon era. It's based on those 2 different figures that I created, that glass sculpture. And it's blue, but this has uranium in it. So once there's a UV light, it glows within the body of the dogu. And this is called Water Within. And this is a self-portrait to me that I basically weigh my own body weight and then convert it to the amount of water, the volume of water, and then that also calculate it back to amount of glass. So I know it's complicated, but the total amount, what you see here, is my body, how much water I have within my body. And then it's very subtle, but some of them have a very slow movement of water dripping into the glass, sort of like ice cube feeling. And each one has a small amount of uranium in it. And then I started making orbs. And these are the pieces that you see at the museum in the exhibit that I'm talking about. And that also really reflected back to my glass pyrograph pieces to use colors. So at this point, my work really started linking all together. At some point, I thought that my work would be going to two completely different directions. One would be glass pyrograph, and one would be more political or socially engaged work. And this is a third film I'm showing at the museum, Vitrified.
Mizu. すべての始まり。そしてすべての終わり。生まれ、育まれ、そして死んでゆく。私は子供を産まなかったから。100万年経っても消えないものを作ってしまった。100万年。それは子供に受け継がれ、面々と引き継がれる。なぜ？答えは聞こえない。答えは返ってこない。なぜ？答えのない答えを探して、また生まれ、また死んでゆく。
And some still shots from the film. The location of the filming of this work is in a whole rainforest. It's in a national park in the Olympic Peninsula. And also the coastline close to Nia Bay, which is the closest point when I think about US and Japan. That's the closest point to Japan across the Pacific Ocean. So my intention was to release this uranium glass orb to the ocean, the closest point to Japan. And this is the last film I show, and this is a
What's really important? Ask yourself. If you're not sure, rest for a bit. Somewhere deep inside, everybody knows. After all, there is love.
So this film was made in a little bit different tone. I think my work and film has been more, how can I say, it's a little bit scary, you know, and I wanted to mix like a beauty and kind of like eerie scene. That's what I usually do. But this one has upbeat drums, and using this glass vessel I created and dropping it. And I used the Ai Weiwei's Han Dynasty's, you know, the well-known photo series, three photo series, and I used that as an homage for this piece. And then finally, this is the last part of my slide presentation. I want to talk about the making of Broken Poems of Fireflies, which is the exhibit at the museum and has two parts. One is 3 films, and then another one is the installation with uranium orbs. And then that is really based on my childhood memory. The title of Broken Poems of Fireflies came from that. And my parents and I visited Nagano Prefecture every year, summer and winter. And then this is not from Nagano, but the rice field is there by the mountains. And then one of those humid, hot summer in dark, just have your, you see this beautiful rice field with dark water, has reflection of moonlight. And then the fireflies just flies over. It's really mesmerizing, and I remember watching them really quietly for a long time with my parents. And then this particular image is from Kumano region, and it's beautiful rice terrace, as you see. And then they have ritual called Tanada Mushi Okuri, which means that over the rice terrace, they send off insects for praying good harvest, the rice harvest. So what they do is to use those torches, and the village, members, young to old, walk through this beautiful terrace to get rid of harmful, unwanted insects before the rice, field starting to grow over the summer. And then, but they have this like chanting to say, get rid of those bad insects, but please stay, fireflies stay for our enjoyment for the summer. So this, through the research, I found this fact that there's a ritual like this, and I was very kind of moved by it. And I wanted to use that combination of this beautiful ritual in Japan, in the countryside, and my memory from childhood to create a series of work. And then the making of took me about 2 years. Ryan knows the process. We had many sketches and different ideas. And one point I was proposing to make this rice field terrace as a platform. And then I always had this like a nature changing, the moons, 4 seasons in Japan. It's a beautiful thing about different words that we use in Japanese poetry. For example, haiku. We have 24 different segments from the 1 year. And then so I wanted to incorporate something like poetic to the work. And this is one of those glass orbs that I created particularly for this exhibit. And as you see, there's an inner world. And I think I can see the association to the earth and the ocean. And then where the bright green you see is the uranium, where radioactive material is reacting to UV light. And other colors that I mainly used are blue tones and greens. And the left side is with UV light showing uranium. And the right side, if you don't have UV light, you don't really see it. It's slightly kind of yellowish green. That's where the uranium is. But with the regular light, you don't see it. So this is sort of like a metaphor that after Fukushima nuclear disaster, I learned so much, researched so much that what it is to have, nuclear particles, cesium, for example, in the air or in the ocean. You don't smell it, you don't see it, you don't feel it, but it's there. And I want to show you the process of making. So those are the color palettes that I had. And some mixed colors, some are single colors, but it probably like 20 to 25 different tones of blue to greens. And then what you see yellow on the left side bottom are the uranium glass. And I buy those. They are actually surprisingly available to purchase as glass colors. And for this particular project, I purchased supplies from New Zealand. And they are radioactive, as you see. It's because it's glowing, affecting, reacting to UV light, but it's a very low radiation. And actually, it's a letter come from the New Zealand governmental office to say this is safe to import and use. And so you see this color. Probably this is a cobalt blue because it's a heat. You see the different color in red. But I'm applying sort of like a wavy shape to a core of the piece. So that's how I made individual piece. So each one is unique and a different combination of colors. So sometimes you make a little bit of a longer piece and then put it together to make it more like a round shape. And this is probably the second and third layers of glass gathering. And then last layer is always clear. And reheating, so it's a process, it's pretty long. If a piece is larger, what I have, the largest is about 7 inches in diameter. It takes for a couple of hours in the hot shop until I put it into the oven. So I have great teams, and I have a few more people not showing this picture, but usually have 4 to 6 people group as my team to make. I don't know, if we have a really productive day, we might be able to make 10 to 12, something like that. And then this is showing how the piece is going into the oven. We call annealing oven. And then this is the most nerve-wracking part for me. When blowing glass, you see it, and I know what's going on. But once you put it into annealing oven, you cannot see it for 10 days because the glass needs to be cooled down really slowly to avoid any stress within the glass. Otherwise, it's going to crack. So as you see, Etsuko 8-day cycle, remaining 182 hours, 53 seconds. So it's a long time to wait. And do not open. This sign was so important to me, like please do not open during the time of 10 days because I use Pratt Art Center for making these pieces. So it's a community studio and a lot of people go in and out. And then finally, I was able to see some of the pieces beautifully done and came out. And as you can see now, the glass without UV light, they look like those. And I kept making and making, and until I think I probably have enough pieces to compose this installation. And the table I put together for the show is 10 feet by 16 feet and composed by 4 platforms. So I made about 100 pieces and selected 85. And then tested UV lights, kind of like how it's going to look in dark. And I had a few different ways of showing the lights, really strong to subtle, and built the controller. I had a wonderful lighting designer to work with this project, Dave, who helped me so much on this project. And then we had this 85 rings with UV light inside in the circle. And each one is numbered and matched with glass and laid out in my studio. So as you see, all the cores has numbers. It was kind of insanely labor-intensive project. And then this is the back side of the table. It's like octopus. This is like a hidden part. And the controller has 5 different circuits and have the 5 different combinations of fade in and out. So 5 times 4 table, I have 20 different combination of fading in and out. I made it really subtle. So when and if you have a chance to see the exhibit, please stay in the gallery for a while and maybe pay attention to 1 or 2 orbs. So you see a slow kind of breathing. I wanted to connect this work to human breathing. And I realized that when I made this piece was before pandemic and before George Floyd incident. But now I think it's becoming much more, how can I say, thinking about breathing, that making a different layer of meanings to my work. And I thought that was very interesting. And this is my last slide. So thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Etsuko. We do have one question that we can start with, and it's wonderful to see you now with those orbs you just described in the gallery behind you. Wendy Simmons is asking about the harmfulness of the uranium. She's saying, she's assuming that you wouldn't use it if it was harmful at all for you to be using it.
Right. Yeah. So I know this is one of those questions that, because I'm trying to talk about the danger of, nuclear waste or nuclear plant or nuclear weapons, of course, using this uranium, I needed to be really, really careful in that context. And then, as I mentioned a little bit, that the radiation level is really low. For example, you go to dentist's office and then have a X-ray done, maybe once a year, and you have the limitation of radiation to your body, and it's much, much less than that. But I also have Geiger counters in my studio, 2 of them. One was gifted my friend, and it's a really classic-looking Geiger counter that the U.S. Army used for Cold War, and it's just a big brick-looking metal piece detector. And the other one is a digital, and that reads really well. And then I realized that when I measure radiation level with the glass, when it's enclosed within glass, they don't see it almost at all. But the raw material, uranium glass material itself, actually, I see the radiation with them. So super careful using it, wearing respirators for any handling the raw materials.
And I know some of you missed some information at the beginning. We did rehearse our presentation yesterday and all worked well. So one more quick apology about our technical issues. Just to be clear, we're at the Jordan Schnitzer Museum of Art. Etsuko's in the galleries. So we're in Pullman, Washington at Washington State University, just to answer the question about that. And Etsuko, we have another question. Squeak Micel, the head of our fine arts department here at Washington State, says, I really appreciate your articulation about the amount of time it took to process a traumatic event like Fukushima. Given our current world state, which you've already mentioned, can you share works you are processing or contemplating now?
Yes, that's a really good question. What a year we are experiencing. It's all new to all of us, and really making me, and I know all of you went through this, some point or rather, thinking about what is really important, and what we are leaving for the future, and what we do every day really matters. And so I am thinking, not making yet, because I think, again, this is going to take me a little while to really come up with the actual work, but I want to create something that could communicate in a very primitive way. I don't know how to put it in a better way, but really easy to share, and people can relate. So maybe that, for example, would be something like sunlight that you appreciate, something like a baby's smile that I think everybody likes to see it. It's something, so I'm probably trying to question myself, what is really fundamental as a person? What is you look for as a happiness in your life? Something like that. So I think my search will go beyond anything I see, but it's like more inner seeking that has to happen to create the new work.
Thank you. We also have a really good question about collaboration. Michelle Kumada is saying, with glass, you're working with a team. How does that influence your art? And I'm sure we could also open that up to your work with the films as well, and the imaging that takes place.
Mm-hmm. Yes. I think I see both ways, both sides with me. I am just so focused and really particular and super specific about my work. So I may have hard time working with people, honestly. But at the same time, I'm really flexible and open. So it's interesting that I have this like very much like a polarity of character I have. So the filmmaking, for example, was so much fun. Every film that I made, I had filmmakers, photographers, and audio person, like sound engineer, and also I worked with words, so somebody, you know, who's a writer, and all those pieces came together. But what I do, and what I think it's really important through my working process for collaboration, is that I don't really ask for specific framing of the film, for example, saying like I don't do any sketches for frame to frame for filmmaking, but what I do instead is to talk about project a lot from the beginning, or before I even start making or working together. So I just keep the dialogues going between the collaborators, and then as we go, we change, and then I accept all the suggestions, and then it's a collaboration. And then also my thoughts and will change as we work together. So it's really evolving as we go, and open for that as an opportunity. But the dialogue is the most important thing through my collaboration process, rather than direct to try to achieve some certain outcome.
Wonderful. We also have a question from Christina Chung about the different sizes of the orbs, wondering if they're symbolic.
Yeah, I think that the size is so important to us. Like, it's just so intimate. You know, these are all pieces that I have in this show. Is you can hold it. It's like human size that you can associate in your daily life. The smaller one is like 2 inches in diameter, and the larger ones that I have is about 7 inches. The volume looks very different. If even 1 inch diameter difference make a huge difference as a mass. But I wanted to create this piece not like enormous installation. You feel more intimate, getting close to each pieces as you walk through, because you can associate. And then again, this image is really coming from my childhood memory of fireflies. So something very subtle, not like too impactful.
Thank you. Etsuko, will you be having any exhibitions in the Seattle area anytime soon?
No, it's actually interesting. So all my shows got canceled and postponed and started again. So I had like 7 shows this year, and then everything will end by the end of this year. So I have no idea what's going to be like next year.
Yes. Well, we're so happy to have you with us in the galleries right now.
Thank you.
I'll wait just one more moment and see if we have any other questions come in our chat. If anyone is confused about the chat, there is a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. We have a question from Pat saying, you're inspired by nature. Is there a type of place that is most inspirational for you? This might be a really good question to close with.
Yeah, well, I showed a couple of past projects, and one was called Walk with Mist, and other one was Nachi, and both relate to water. And the first one was Cenote. Cenote, am I saying right? It's a water cave in Mexico. And a shaft of light came in from the open sky with all the leaves, and it's like a little jungle in the water cave. That's where I was floating and then looking up. It was a beautiful moment. And then the waterfall in Nachi, in Kumano, that was inspiration to create a larger installation at the Museum of University of Wyoming Art Museum. So they all relate to water. So I was curious about, like, because I work with fire all the time, you know, glass blowing and glass pyrography is so much to do with language is fire. But I think the outcome of glass pyrography or glass pieces that I make is so much to do with fluidity. So I think I have really deep connection to both fire and water.
Thank you so much, Etsuko, for being with us tonight. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
There are applause.
I wish I see it. I don't see the chat part, which is okay, but I love to see it later. Thank you so much for tuning in today. I appreciate it.